like to thank up front Kerwin and Frank Harris, Shriver, and Jacobson for hosting us today. First, what I'd like to do to begin our discussion is sort of give a quick history to set the stage for our panels of experts and to sort of explain how we got here. So for those of you who track immigration reform and track the immigration debate, you may recall that in the summer of 2014, there were high hopes that immigration reform had legs and was going to pass the House of Representatives after having passed in the U.S. Senate in 2013. But in the mid-June of 2014, then Speaker John Boehner informed the President that the House would not be considering immigration reform legislation that year or in that Congress. And then you may recall a famous press conference where the President came out on June 30th and bemoaned this development and said that he himself would plan to fix the immigration system to the extent he could, given his executive powers. And that was on June 30th, 2014. Then on November 20th, 2014, the President did just that, announcing a new policy that would, among other things, allow undocumented immigrants who had lived continuously reside in the U.S. since before January 1st, 2010, who had U.S. citizen or legal permanent resident children, to stay in the country for 3 years and work legally. This is the Deferred Action for Parents of Americans and Legal Permanent Residents program. The President also expanded the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, eliminating the age ceiling and making individuals who began residing here before January 1st, 2010 eligible. It is estimated that these two programs could assist as many as 4 million undocumented persons. Of course, as we all know, these programs never went into effect, as Texas and 25 other states have successfully sued in the Federal District Court of Southern Texas and the U.S. Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals to block their implementation. And as we know, the Obama administration appealed the appeals court decision on November 10th, 2015, and the Supreme Court accepted the case of United States versus Texas on January 19th, 2016. And oral arguments in the case will be heard on Monday, April 18th, a few days from now. So this is a timely discussion of the many issues that are involved in this historic case. And we have two panels of legal and policy experts to discuss the numerous issues, legal, policy-related, political, involved in this historic case. Questions like, where does the executive's power in shaping immigration policy end, and where does Congress's begin? Are the underlying policy goals of the President's actions of benefit to our country, or do they harm our country? What are the political ramifications of the Supreme Court's decision, either way they decide, on the immigration debate in Congress and on the campaign trail? These are some of the questions that our experts will address this morning and our audience. So to begin the program, I'd like to first introduce our first expert, Donald Kerwin, who is the Executive Director of the Center for Migration Studies. He's been the Executive Director for 4 years now. He's also the former head of the Catholic Legal Immigration Network Clinic for 16 years. And Don is a prolific author, writer, researcher, and speaker. And he's also the co-author of a recent study by CMS studying the characteristics of the DACA and DAPA population that would benefit from these programs. So, Don, I welcome you, and you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I don't think this is on. It is, okay. Well, thank you very much, Kevin. Appreciate it. Nice to see you all here. So our idea was to start with a brief overview of the populations that are at the heart of the Supreme Court case. And they are the potential beneficiaries of the Deferred Action for Parents of Americans and Lawful Permanent Residents, that is the DAPA program, and the beneficiaries of the expanded Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals Program, which we're going to call DACA Plus. The current DACA program, we'll just call it the original DACA program or current program, but we'll call the new expanded DACA Plus. As you know, Bob Warren of the Center for Migration Studies has produced a very valuable set of estimates on the U.S. unauthorized population based on the Census Bureau's American Community Survey. And CMS has made these estimates publicly available on our website, both by state and by PUMA, which stands for Public Use Micro Data Area, and that's a geographic area of about 100,000 that the Census Bureau uses. Our website, for those who are interested, also has estimates of those who are potentially eligible to naturalize in the United States by state and by PUMA. So what we did is we basically used the estimates on the unauthorized for the entire population to compute the numbers and characteristics of the DAPA and the DACA Plus populations based on the program eligibility requirements. There was not always an exact match between the program requirements and the population characteristics of the American Community Survey, but the matches were close. For example, the ACS has legal non-citizens, so we use those to is our proxy for lawful permanent residents in doing these calculations. We also ran estimates for the original DACA program, which is ongoing and as you know, is not affected by the US v. Texas case. And just very briefly, to go through, and most of you will know this, but the DAPA program would cover undocumented persons who are parents to US citizens or a lawful permanent resident as of November 20, 2014, who've continuously resided in the U.S. since January 1st, 2010, and who don't fall within a DHS immigration enforcement priority group. The original DACA program covers undocumented children, undocumented persons who arrived as children and who meet various residency, educational, good moral character, and other requirements. And I'm not going to go through all the requirements. There was an age 31 upward age cutoff. And the main requirement is they're enrolled in school, have graduated from high school or obtained a GED, or were honorably discharged from the U.S. Coast Guard or Armed Services, and of course various good moral character requirements as well in terms of convictions and whether they threaten national security or public safety. On November 20, 2014, the Obama administration sought to expand eligibility for this program in two significant ways. First, by moving up the permissible entry date to January 1st, 2010, which would of course make more recent arrivals eligible for this, for deferred action. And second, by removing the upward age restriction of 31, which would open up DACA to persons who have been in the United States for far longer periods of time. So what did we find? Well, our overall estimates is that the DAPA program would apply to nearly 3.8 million persons, and the DACA Plus program to, of course, a much smaller population of around 260,000 people. But the 260,000, of course, is beyond the 1.26 million who are eligible under the current DACA program. In addition, we found roughly 176,000 persons who were potentially eligible for both DAPA and DACA. In other words, they were brought as children, and our parents, they were both brought as children, and our parents to a U.S. citizen or a lawful permanent residence. So, I mean, the basic takeaway is that the numbers affected by these programs are large. The programs DACA and DAPA would cover nearly 50% of the U.S. unauthorized population. We found, our report found, and it's in the back of the room for those who are here, and it's on our website for those who are listening remotely, that these populations are deeply embedded in U.S. society based on long tenure, family ties, English language proficiency, employment, and many other factors. As a result, many people, starting with the mixed status families of program beneficiaries and moving outward, depend in a variety of ways on potential DAPA and DACA beneficiaries. The eligibility criteria for DAPA guarantees that this population has close ties to U.S. residents, particularly U.S. citizen children. And we found, in fact, that 89% are parents of U.S. citizens only, 7% have lawful permanent resident children only, and 4% have both U.S. citizen and lawful permanent resident children. We also found that 20% are married to a U.S. citizen or a legal non-citizen. And I think that latter point is very crucially important because it means that many in this population are eligible for family-based visa petitions, putting them on a path to permanent residency and ultimately to citizenship. In fact, some are certainly already the beneficiaries of approved family-based visa petitions. In addition, 261,000 U.S. citizen children live with their, this is adult children, live with their DAPA eligible parents and could also petition for a family-based visa for their parents. Other adult children, U.S. citizen children, who don't live with their DAPA eligible parents aren't captured in this figure. So the 261,000 figure of adult children who could petition for their parents is actually a low figure. 81% of potential DAPA recipients have lived in the U.S. for 10 years or more, and 27% for 20 years or more. 94% are employed, and 77% are within those prime working ages of 21 to 44, ages 21 to 44. 47% have at least a high school degree, and 23% have attended college or have a college degree. DAPA households are mostly low income. The average personal income is $23,500, with 68% of the households at or above the poverty line, and 37% of the DAPA eligible have health insurance. Okay, switching to DACA now. 85% of the original DACA population has resided in the United States for 10 years or more, and 19% for 20 years or more. So that's for the current program beneficiaries. For the DACA Plus, this is fairly remarkable. The figures are 72% for 10 years or more, and a remarkable 65% have been here for 20 years or more. Remember, because of lifting that upward age restriction. And these groups are also, the DACA groups are also employed at very high rates. Current DACA at 89%, DACA Plus at 90%. In terms of their education, 93% of DACA recipients have at least a high school degree, and 95% of potential, that is DACA Plus beneficiaries, have at least a high school degree. And 46% of original DACA and 26% of DACA Plus are currently enrolled in school. Thus, you have an awful lot of DACA beneficiaries who both work and who attend school. 74% of original DACA and 76% of DACA Plus households are above the poverty rate. So financially a little bit better off than the DAPA households. And 91% of original DACA and 83% of the DACA Plus group speak English well, very well, or exclusively. Okay? And this compares to about 50% of DAPA beneficiaries. And kind of an interesting fact that I guess surprised us, but probably shouldn't have, is that all three groups have access to a computer and the internet at very, very high rates. So very computer literate groups. So in short, what we see are populations that have long tenure, that work at high rates, and that have very strong family ties in the United States. And you can see that these programs affect millions of people, and given their ties within the United States, of course, anything that happens to them would affect many million more, starting with families, but also in the labor force and elsewhere. So that's kind of the summary of who we're talking about and who's at the center of the debate right now. I don't know, Kevin, do you think we should take some questions, or I'm happy to jump to the legal panel now if that would be.
Does anyone have any questions on Don's findings? And please identify yourself.
Sure. I'm Sonia Schwartz. I work at Georgetown University Center for Children and Families. And I was a little surprised about the high rate, I mean, not that high rate, but about the rate that had health insurance that you said were potentially DAPA eligible. And I wondered if you dug any deeper, I can also look in the paper and figure out, I would imagine that's private insurance. I'm not really eligible for anything else, but I wonder.
Yeah, no, I don't think we did dig deeper, so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you said the statistic that 261...
If you could, just identify yourself.
I'm sorry about that.
That's okay.
Oh, thank you.
Hi, my name is Pedro Gutierrez. I'm with the Office of the Attorney General, and I just had a question about the 261,000 you said live with parents that are adult children. I'm just kind of curious what you qualify as adult children, like the parents are dependent on them, or they are dependent on each other, or I'm just kind of curious how that statistic of that worked.
Well, it's adult children, age 21 or over, who live with parents who would be DAPA eligible. So it's not an issue of dependency. We don't really particularly know that, but we just know who's in that household.